I'm going to be talking to Jeff Turner, who is the Clean Mobility Lead at Dunsky, and they recently undertook a survey for Transport Canada that included contacting about 80% of the auto dealerships across the country, and they found that over half of them didn't have any electric vehicle inventory. So welcome to the interview, Jeff.
Great, thanks for having me, Markham.
So what's going on in the auto industry that is leading to a shortage of inventory? And by the way, in the dealerships that we drive by occasionally, there's not very much inventory of any kind. And I assume that that has some bearing on the availability of electric vehicles as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of things going on right now in the automotive supply chain. And so I think, this study that just was released is from data from last year. At the time, we were asking whether the COVID situation was having an impact on supply chain for zero emission vehicles. At the time, it didn't seem to be that much of a factor, but I think we're just looking to launch another analysis on this front this year. And you're absolutely right. I see it at the dealerships around where I live as well. Those lots are pretty empty of all types of vehicles. So there's definitely a massive disruption happening as we speak. But the purpose of this study is to understand whether there are any particular barriers for zero emission vehicles. And we've been doing it for a few years now, and our findings suggest that in general, it's harder to find a zero emission vehicle than it is most other types of vehicles. And so that's sort of the challenge that Transport Canada has been trying to get a hold of over the past few years.
Yeah, that certainly reflects the conversations I'm seeing on social media in the EV owners groups. What about the effect of zero emission vehicle mandates in BC and Quebec? Because I've talked to other experts who say that that has forced the or caused the auto companies to send most of their EVs to those two provinces.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, ZEV mandates, those are exactly the types of policies that we're asking about. I've been involved in the Canadian EV policy landscape for over 10 years. And this topic has been coming up that entire time. And it's all because, we hear these horror stories about lineups, months-long waiting lists and things like that. So ZEV mandates are seen as a policy that can ensure that automakers are meeting a minimum requirement in terms of making that product available. And I think throughout this discussion over the past many years, the response has been that, well, we just don't have enough data to really understand to what extent is this actually a problem. And so that's what we're looking to answer with these studies, have some regular reporting to understand to what extent are EVs available in dealerships across Canada. And to nobody's surprise, really, we're finding that Quebec and BC are much better off than all the other provinces. So absolutely, I think the ZEV mandate is one of the factors. There's also generally the fact that Quebec and BC have had a broadly speaking, a more supportive policy environment, financial incentives, charging infrastructure that means that the market is just that much further along. But I think that the question remains, what should these other markets be doing, especially now that we've seen significant advances in charging infrastructure, financial incentives in places like Atlantic Canada, significant steps forward in charging infrastructure in the prairies as well. So I think now the question is shifting to, if we are acting on a number of these other sides, on the demand side of the equation, are we seeing enough vehicle inventory to meet the needs of the demand that we're trying to stimulate? And I would say that the data that we've seen so far suggests that, there's probably fewer EVs available than interested EV buyers right now.
What about the upcoming federal ZEV mandate? Was promised in the last election campaign by the Liberals. Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault has been given the task of getting that together. What will it look like, if you have any ideas on that, and when might we see it?
Well, I think we're all still waiting with bated breath for the details on what exactly it will look like. The one thing we do know is that they've set a pretty solid target of 100% ZEV market share by 2035. So that's pretty clear. What's less clear at this stage is, for example, any interim targets on the way there. We did some modeling for the Quebec government 2 years ago before they announced their 2035 target. Our own modeling suggested that, a 2030 target needs to be somewhere on the order of, 70 to 75% to put us on that trajectory to hit 100% by 2035. But I don't think we've seen anything firm from the federal government yet about what those interim targets might look like. I think another important question is whether those interim targets will have any geographic specificity to them, because okay, 100% is 100%. There's no room for any wiggle room for, Quebec to make up for laggard provinces elsewhere. But at those interim steps, say we have a target of 70% by 2030, is that 70% in every province, or is it 70% on average? In which case, that's going to raise some important questions for those other markets that we're seeing are currently, really struggling to kickstart the market and get that inventory in those dealership lots to help get the market going over there.
Now, Jeff, I've had the opportunity the last couple of months to interview EV analysts who are looking, they're talking about global sales and global sales forecasts. And the point that they make is that the auto industry has had tremendous investment over the last couple of years and is really spending, hundreds of billions of dollars on retooling to make electric vehicles. And that's is just now starting to show up in inventory supply. So given the expansion of the industry, and also in Canada, because we've had GM and Ford and others invest in EV manufacturing plants here. So when is all that supply going to hit, and what does it mean for the future of EV supply in Canada?
Yeah, this is all very exciting. I think, I would agree with a lot of observers who would say that over the past 10 years, there's been a bit of a lack of enthusiasm from some of the automakers in this space. But that enthusiasm is certainly starting to materialize. The massive investments that have been announced in manufacturing here and abroad, and just the level of energy that we're seeing from some of the large automakers that are clearly starting to recognize this as an important competitive segment of the market. So that's really encouraging, and we are seeing those numbers materialize. Our latest report showed a very significant increase in inventory. On the one hand, I think we are saying that there's the majority of dealerships that don't have any EVs at all, and there's still some major problems. But we are seeing a really positive trajectory so far, and I think that's all tied into this increasing competitiveness of the ZEV market. So it is starting to materialize. I think the question remains, though, is it going to happen fast enough? Is it going to focus in jurisdictions where the policy is setting a pretty high bar and the automakers are responding to those policies pretty clearly? But I'm optimistic that the industry has started to move in the right direction, and it's really exciting to see the number of products that are coming to market. And it's just a question of whether we can get enough of those products to meet the demand that's really starting to pick up across the country.
Well, just to finish up the interview, Jeff, there also seems to be a corresponding change in consumer demand for these. It wasn't maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I was interviewing experts who were saying, the typical EV buyer was a higher income couple, that had, green values, that sort of thing. And that seems to have changed, almost right across the board. There's very, very high demand. Almost everybody seems to be either buying or considering an EV these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I live in a rural community, and I would absolutely agree. I speak a lot with farmers, carpenters, other contractors, folks like that, and just overhearing them on a construction site, they're all pretty excited about these new electric pickup trucks that are coming to market. I think the automakers are recognizing that there are a lot of selling features for these new vehicles that go above and beyond just minimizing fuel consumption and emissions. There are a lot of bonus features like just the packaging of the vehicles, front storage, lockable storage, export power capabilities to run your tools or even your house in a blackout scenario. So I think you're absolutely right. There's been a bit of a step change in the past 2 years or so, where it's all feeding off of each other. The automakers are responding to increased demand, and that demand is responding to the increasing level of energy and marketing efforts from those automakers that are getting into this space.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much. Really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the chance to have the conversation. Thanks, Markham.